Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Good morning, everybody. Good morning.
One more time.
It's tough to get Jews to stop schmoozing. I'm Paul. I'm the executive director of the Society for Humanistic Judaism. Yay. Thank you all for being here bright and early and for being at this conference and for all that you do. It is really a remarkable collection of people, and I'm really honored to be working with you and for you. So today in this session, I want to talk about the present and the future. When you hit a milestone, like 50 years, you can't help but think about the past, the present, and the future. And Miriam did such a beautiful job last night talking about our past. And this morning, we want to be present in the multiple meanings of that word and also start thinking a bit about our future. And I will admit that being in the moment is a challenge for me, and maybe for you sometimes as well. I'm often rushing ahead in my mind to what has to happen in the future, what's next. Miriam and I and our very small staff here at SHJ has spent months preparing for this moment, and it's hard for me not to be thinking about what happens at the next session instead of just being here. And I am here now, and I'm so appreciative of who came to this and the opportunities that we all have together around humanistic Judaism. And I've gotten better at being in the moment. Becoming a parent has helped me be better at being in the moment. I'm amazed at how quickly my kids are going through the various stages. My youngest is 3, and I see parents with newborns, and I can't even remember the feel of having to hold an infant because they can't keep their own head up. And it was only 3 years ago, but it feels like so long ago because every stage comes so quickly and so rapidly. And I find myself thinking, I need to hold on to this moment. I need to take a mental picture of this cute thing my son just said. And then I take out my phone and take an actual picture, which you can see if you follow me on Facebook on a daily basis. But it's not the same as the experience of it and that fleetingness of it. And so this is a fleeting moment, but a really wonderful moment, a moment that I'm really honored to be a part of as a relative newcomer to humanistic Judaism. And when I think about who's in this room, I actually ran the numbers and I did a bit of a calculation and determined that the folks in this room combined, the leadership and the volunteers, have done a combined 2,157 years of effort to make humanistic Judaism what it is today. I totally made that number up, right? But it sounds real, doesn't it? It could be true, right? Well, a quarter of those years is all on Miriam, so just kidding, sorry. Ooh, I'm sorry. I'll repent for that. So, half of this session will be about the present, but then I do want to talk about the future. And those of you who are working with me, particularly our board members, know I'm always thinking about where do we go from here. And in thinking about my comments today, I imagined what it might be like to be in this room at SHJ at 100. And so, yes, so.
Miriam will be here.
Well, I'll be 120. Good Jewish age. There you go.
So when Libby Otto is here, where is Libby? So Libby will be here, and they could roll my cryogenically frozen head out onto the stage.
Hey, I knew the guy who did that. Riverside, California.
So I would hope that they can look at this video and laugh at our clothes and our hairstyle, and that we are still having to move our mouths when we talk instead of just the Wi-Fi chips in our brain. But, and show this video and say that this conference was a turning point. This conference was the time when a movement came together to determine what the next steps are, what the future is going to look like, how we hand this over to the next generation of humanistic Jews. And to do that, we do need to think about the future, but we also have to articulate what it is about the present, what it is about our movement that's so special. So to that end, first of all, as a frame for this session, I came up with 4 questions. Sounds familiar, right? It is technically, depending on how many days you count for Passover, it is technically still Passover for some of the Jews. And I went with the theme, and we do have matzah here, and I hear we have matzah croutons for the salad at lunch, so we did our part. So here are my, so the Manishtana is, how is our movement different than all other Jewish denominational movements? I can only do the Manishtana part. Someone has to write the rest of that in Hebrew. Sivan can do. How is our movement, and I'm not going to sing it, how is our movement different than all other Jewish denominational movements? In all other Jewish denominational movements, God worship and appeals to the supernatural are at least a part of the passion for their members. But in our movement, where do we find passion and meaning in a Judaism beyond God? So to begin to answer that, I recruited a whole bunch of you, and I've given you a total of no more and no less than 6 words, and we got a whole lot of takers on it. And if you forgot your 6 words, because it has to be exactly 6 words, if you go over, you will be forcibly removed from this conference. If you forgot your 6 words, I have it here. So I'm going to give it to Evie to hold on to this folder. And what I'd like folks to do who agreed to share their 6 words is to come up right now and line up over here like a L shape from here to here. And whoever bravely wants to go first, wow, it's the whole audience. Wait, I forgot mine. All right, so what I'd like to ask you to do, I hear way more than 6 words over here. Someone, who's going first? Great, come on up, that's you. Come here. I won't bite, yes, and you follow. You can line up right behind her. Move the line up. And so we're going to say our 6 words and then hand the microphone to the person behind you. You got this, Sue?
They didn't alphabetize it.
No. Say our 6 words, hand the microphone to the person next to you, and then return to your seat. But I'm going to go first.
Eva is suggesting you ask the question that you asked us.
The question I just asked?
No.
Oh, the way I asked it?
The way you asked us.
Perfectly capable of doing this.
In 6 words, what makes you feel passionate about humanistic Judaism? And let me give a little bit of a background. There's this thing called 6-word memoir. And there's a kind of a legend around how it started that someone said to Ernest Hemingway, a challenge, can you write a story in 6 words? And he wrote, for sale, baby shoes, never used. Right? Now, no offense, I don't know that there are any Hemingways in this line over here, but we did get some really excellent 6 words. Mine was not among them, but I'll go first. Honesty about my beliefs plus kreplach. And then we'll just...
Only connection left to Judaism, humanism. No longer hiding what I believe. Open space for unity and diversity.
Humanistic Judaism takes courage and integrity. Authentic Judaism without having to compromise. cultural, spiritual Jewish identity with integrity.
Preserving Judaism for the next generation.
Living with integrity while celebrating Judaism.
Judaism can evolve, so can I.
People, integrity, philosophy, reason, culture, Jewish.
SHJ brought me back to Judaism.
A Jewish life without supernatural authority.
Judaism with intellectual and progressive stimulation.
Tradition, comfort, and community without hypocrisy.
Humanistic Judaism is who I am.
Authenticity, reality, humanities, my parents' values.
Only Judaism consistent with my beliefs.
Judaism, my way and my beliefs.
Growing Jewish legacy, our labor's fruit. Humanistic Judaism is my Jewish home.
For me, for all, now, hello.
Feel-good connection with my past.
Authentic expression of who I am.
A profoundly meaningful path for living.
Secular Jews deserve Jewish community too.
Everything I believe, nothing I don't.
Celebrate and honor my heritage authentically.
At last, I am honestly Jewish.
Wonderful, thank you. That was great, and each was unique, but there were themes throughout it, and maybe the next slogan for your community was somewhere in there. So one person that I am going to allow more than 6 words to is Rabbi Sivan Maas, who I also posed this question to. Those of you who don't know her are in for a real treat. Rabbi Maas is the first Israeli rabbi ordained by the International Institute for Secular Humanistic Judaism in 2003. And she now serves as the Dean of Tamura, the IISHJ in Jerusalem. Sivan, do you want this microphone?
Yes, I will probably need it. Shalom, Shabbat Shalom, and Pesach Sameach. Yes, it's still Pesach, and it's still Sameach, fun, happy. So, how can I add anything to articulated thoughts of the kind that you just gave? Certainly a challenge. So what I'm going to try to do this morning is to try to give my words, or the way that I define these words, but also to talk about our role. So let's start with a question, and please raise your hand. Who has already started getting ready for the next Shabbat dinner? We were talking about the present and being in the present, which is certainly part of who we are and what we do, and part of it is planning. And why am I asking that? Why am I asking about Shabbat dinner as if it really matters? I mean, why? Did you already start cooking? No, you didn't start cooking. But we need to cook all the time. We need food for thought, and not just food to consume. And that is our role. That is your role. There is not one person in the room that cannot be a leader. Not one. You can be your own leader. You lead yourself. You can lead your children. You can lead your friends. You can lead whoever you feel you want to. But you know what? I don't think you can give up that option before you tried it. And once you've tried it, you have to stay true to your cause. One of the things that I think we're missing in our Jewish culture today, not just secular humanistic culture, but in our Jewish culture today, is that within our families, we forget that we are leaders. And we dismiss it as if it doesn't really matter what happens when the family comes together on Shabbat dinner, on Passover, or any other day. It's okay. It's okay if the food is good. It's okay if we dress up nicely. It's okay if we mention it's Shabbat. It's okay if we pick up whatever text that we have around, which we've been using for years. Okay, so let's use it again. Why? Don't you realize that this is the moment that you have the attention, or you can get the attention of your loved ones, the people that you care enough about that you've opened the door of your house to, your home to? We've given that up. We can't anymore. We absolutely can't. It may not be fashionable or cool as grandparents when your kids come over to say, wait a minute, people, before you start eating, there's something I have to say. No, mommy, come on, let's eat. No. How do you want the future to be that your grandchild or someone which is very important to you, who is a kid now, in the future to say, when he hears the music or when he hears a tone, how will he say, this resonates. This used to be in my grandmother's home. If it wasn't there, he hasn't. He doesn't have it. She doesn't have it. If we care about the future, we have to seize the moment. You have to accept leadership. I know there are wonderful stories, and I enjoy the Bible because it has wonderful stories. And certainly around this time, the situation is, we're told in the story that Moses walked around, he saw a burning bush, okay, and the bush talked to him, and he actually listened, and he answered back. But what was this idea? The idea was, take leadership. You have to take leadership upon yourself, and he didn't want to. Or at least that's the way the story writer wanted us to think, that he didn't want to. And eventually, he got a tool. He got a staff. Pick up your staff. He got a staff. And then he got different directions. In our last Seder, I wrote a manual for staff. How do you use a staff and what you should beware of when you get a staff. But you can, and I can tell you about that later, but you can choose your own staff. So I'm going to introduce to you a staff today, which is words. And let me show you what I chose to show you today. I don't know if you can all see it, but I hope you can. These are just going to be a few words which we use all the time. And the more concise you are, like you were with the 6 words, the clearer you are. The message is clear. You don't have to say a lot when you look at it. So this is a description of me. That's my staff. You can use your own, but this is my staff, okay? So I am Jewish, which means for me, culture and family. Which means for me, culture and family. These are the images that I chose for culture and family. Okay, the roots, the rejuvenation, the heart. That's for me to be Jewish. For me to be humanistic means that I have a moral compass. These are my values. This is the set of values. Now, this is really easy because when somebody comes to you and asks you, and I think that's why your idea, Paul, of the 6 words was so important. When people come to us and ask us, what is Humanistic Judaism? Whoa, we have a whole course to give them. They're not asking for a course. This is what they're asking for. And we need to be able to answer this to them. The other word, which I've been grappling with the image. So I'm giving you one without an image and one with an image. Think about it for a minute. And the word is secular, which for me means to be autonomous or sovereign. Okay? Now, the image that I chose has to do with yesterday's talk. Has to do with what does it mean to be sovereign. So one way to be sovereign is for people to come together and say, let's create a country. Let's express our nationality with a country. And let's make sure that we are sovereign. And in order for us to be sovereign, what do we have to do? So when Israel was created, the group of people that created Israel looked at it as Jewish, humanistic, and secular. This is the foundation of Israel. This is the staff that I use, and therefore, this becomes my superpower. What's yours? Now, I think that once you understand that it is a superpower, because you have created a synergy that wasn't there before, or you agreed to a synergy that you've read or you saw somewhere else. Now, what does the synergy help you to achieve? It helps you to achieve the ability to choose, because now you have a way to choose. So, for example, if you're planning a wedding, we go behind here, if you're planning a Jewish wedding, and you're asking yourself, okay, what does a wedding dress look like? So the first thing that you would think, you would see in your mind is probably a white dress. And that is a very Jewish thing, especially because Queen Victoria wore a white Jewish dress, and for some reason we like to look like celebrities, and she was the celebrity of the colonial times, and everybody wanted to wear white, so they all wore white. But these are all Jewish dresses, every single one of them, and we can put it out later for everybody to see. Once you have created a bigger treasure box, a treasure box of Jewish options, you can then choose. Now you know how to choose because you have a staff. And this is the staff that enables you to choose. But you also need your treasure box. In other words, the more you learn, the more you ask, the more you study, the more you talk to people, your treasure box becomes bigger and bigger. And the legitimacy of your choice starts to exist within your soul. You feel empowered just because of the mere fact that others have done this before you, for generations or for thousands of years, like Paul mentioned before. I don't know why, but it works. We feel that we're doing something legitimate if we can show that smart people did it before us. I don't know why that works, as if we can't be smart enough to do something, but it doesn't feel legitimate if we can't quote a text. So I'm quoting dresses. That's fine. That's an option. This, by the way, is an exhibit that we did in Israel about the options of marriage, of how to create a Jewish wedding. And we basically asked people, what does a Jewish wedding look like? And they said to us, well, a Jewish wedding has a chuppah. And we said, well, what's Jewish about a canopy? And then we started researching canopies, and we realized that everybody uses canopies for various reasons. It's not a Jewish thing. it was translated into Judaism, and it was then presented into Judaism, but it doesn't have to be Jewish. But you can contextualize it Jewishly, and you can do it to anything else. We have this idea that there is this true way to be Jewish, or the true way to look Jewish, or the true way to do Jewish. Well, there isn't, and there never was. It goes back to the question of your leadership. Own it and lead it. I want to show you another thing that we have been doing in Israel. I know that you know this, but in Israel, according to the law, Jews cannot get married unless they get married through the Orthodox way. We talked yesterday about separation of religion and state that doesn't exist in Israel. And one of the things we're fighting for is for it to exist. So how do you fight for it? You decide that you are the leaders, not just the rabbis that are doing the weddings, but the couple themselves. They decide to lead, to be part of a social revolution that says we will wed the way we want to because we believe we should. We do thousands of weddings a year, all the different organizations. We cooperate together to get our message out there. And one of the ways that we do that is this kinds of exhibitions that I can send you, you can download, you can use it in your communities. It's very simple. Make sure, though, that you don't keep it to yourselves. Make sure that you go out there and cooperate with other organizations talking the same language. The same language of saying, listen, Judaism is not just a plural phenomena. We all know that there are Orthodox and there are Reform and there are Conservative and there are secular and there are all kinds of other groups and phenomena going on in the Jewish world today. No. This is part of our ideology. Therefore, we added the ism to the plural. And we said this is pluralism. Like we added ism to human. And we said humanism. It's an ideology. So get together with these other groups. Take this show, which is ready for you. Take this to your JCC. Take this to your college. Take this to other places which is not confined to your closed doors. And say to people, yes, I'm a leader of this idea. And I want to share it with you. And I want to empower other people to make the choices in their wedding. And the last and the most important thing is to feel that what you're doing is legitimate. How? By the mere fact that you say, I am a traditional Jew. Why? Because all Jews, all the time, made revolutions. And you are part of another Jewish revolution, so you are all traditional, legitimate Jews.
Thank you so much, Sivan. This is what Sivan whips up in a day when you say it's too late to have a PowerPoint. It's unbelievable. It's amazing. Thank you. So I have 3 more questions. It's like a real Seder. It's taking a long time to get to and you get food. But question 2, so we have to start off with how is our movement different than all other Jewish denominational movements? In all liberal Jewish denominations, including our own, membership levels are below their past peak. How might Humanistic Judaism be better positioned to address the rise of the nuns? And we heard this last night, and you always have to spell out N-O-N-E-S, not the flying nun. And this is a challenge for us that we've been working on at SHJ, that I've been working on with our individual communities, that I've been speaking about, and many of you have heard me touch on this subject. And what I would say is that Humanistic Judaism is much bigger than a congregational denomination. And I want us to think that way and help people experience Humanistic Judaism along many different paths and in many different ways. And right now, the primary way is through congregational denominationalism, and it still works for many people, including most of us here. But we also know that there are many, many other people who might benefit from humanistic Judaism if we can provide it for them in a way that they can access it, in a way that they're comfortable accessing it. And so it's those additional avenues that we're not looking to replace. With the congregational model, we are looking to innovate. Here at the Birmingham Temple, they have done something I think is really unique. Your first year's membership is free, including if you're sending your kid to school here. And it seems counterintuitive, but if you spend a year in a community educating your child and you haven't pulled them after 6 months, you're in. You see the benefit. And understanding the meaning and the benefit is, to me, the point of providing humanistic Judaism for more people. And we are, in some ways, constricted by this model that none of us invented. Sherwin-Wine did not invent the denominational congregational model. It was working when he applied humanism to Judaism. This was the model. This worked. It is not working for the next generation as much as it did in the past. So we can continue to work on it. We can continue to innovate. Adam Shalom's congregation in Chicago has reworked their membership model, and that seems to have been helpful over the last year or two. Let's continue to do those things, but let's also think about what are the additional pathways that we might provide for people to come into humanistic Judaism. I was raised in the conservative movement in Staten Island, New York, and it was a process for me to learn that I am at least third-generation atheist, if not fourth-generation atheist.
Traditional Jew.
Traditional Jew, that's right. From a very young age, I knew that I didn't believe what I was hearing in the traditional liturgy. I didn't have an outlet to share that with anybody at the congregation I grew up in. And for me, the Bar Mitzvah process was memorizing a bad song in a language I didn't understand. And I finally had enough of it and dropped what I thought was going to be a bombshell on my mom when I told her at age 11 or 12, I don't believe in God and I'm not having a bar mitzvah. And she said, well, I don't either and you're having a bar mitzvah. And I had to figure out, it was somewhat of an eye-opener. And I had to ask myself, well then, why is she a Jewish communal professional? So I'm also a second-generation Jewish communal professional. She ran a significant Jewish community center on Long Island for many years, and I thought, well, why is she dedicating her professional career to the Jewish people? And I knew the answer already, because I knew her mom, my grandmother, who was a Holocaust survivor. My mom was born in a displaced persons camp outside Berlin right after the war. She is my grandparents' third child, but first surviving child. They lost 2 kids in the war and countless family members. But I look at photos of my grandmother and her siblings from the 30s, and they're not wearing black hats with beards. They're wearing black turtleneck shirts, and they're in a Bund meeting. And I see my legacy there, and my mom saw it too. So that was the only theological conversation I think I've ever had with my mom, but it was really helpful for me to think about things a little bit differently. I had a bar mitzvah. I wish I had known at that time what was happening here in the Birmingham Temple. I wish that my mom had looked for options. And I hope that if my kids come back from their Jewish educational experience hating it, that I will look for options. Of course, it will be a problem because their Jewish educational experiences will be in our movement, and my son is 6 and he mentions heaven every so often, and I just freeze up and I'm like, okay, let this pass. But anyway. I worked as a Jewish communal professional in an organization that was focused on outreach, engagement, and particularly for intermarried families, of which I am one. And in 2012, so I got to work with Miriam in 2001, but we kind of didn't connect again. And then Adam in 2012 invited my then boss to come out to a colloquium in Chicago about the adult children of intermarriage. And in talking to, I wasn't privy to the conversation with my boss, but my boss was observant. And the colloquium was over the weekend. And I think Adam kind of explained what the logistics would be, and my boss said, you know who you should talk to? Why don't you talk to Paul? And I came out and I met many of you there, and then Adam was kind enough to invite me back to a colloquium here in 2014, and then he invited me onto the board of the International Institute, and I remember telling him, sure, I like what you do, I'll be on the board, but I'm not going to call myself a humanistic Jew. I'm not going to fly your banner because I'm unaffiliated and I'm post-denominational or I'm trans-denominational or whatever the cool kids are saying. And that was my job at that time, was to help all of the denominations outside of Orthodoxy understand the mindset of people who don't walk through the doors saying, hey, I'm one of you, embrace me. It's not how that works. And now, of course, I am a humanistic Jew. So somewhere along the line, and it wasn't necessarily an aha moment, I realized, oh, I guess I am a humanistic Jew. And frankly, I've always been a humanistic Jew, and I just didn't have the language for it. But if at that moment, Adam had said to me, well, okay, when you recognize that you're a humanistic Jew, then you can serve on the ISHJ board, I wouldn't be standing here. So that difference, like what is the difference there of understanding that it's a process for people? And we don't necessarily think of it that way because it's so much easier to just go by the black and white member, non-member binary. Are you a member? No? Okay. If you become a member, we will do this for you. And if you're not a member, sorry, we can't do that for you. And I want humanistic Judaism to be bigger. I obviously understand the financial piece behind membership. But to me, that gets addressed through mission and cause. And so my third question is, how is our got to start with that. How is our movement different than all other Jewish denominational movements? In other movements or organizations that are growing, whether in the Jewish community or in the secular world, they are all cause-based and working toward a clearly defined mission. What is the mission of humanistic Judaism? And my short but big answer is to improve people's lives and make the world a better place. Thank you. Now, you got to get more specific than that, I understand. But I think we should also keep it in mind for everything we do. And if you are a small local community that does humanistic Shabbat services, I'm going to ask you, what is this doing for the people who come? And or how is it making the world a better place? And I want to hear an answer. I want to hear that answer articulated. And we had lovely 6-word articulations. But those were people who were already deeply invested in humanistic Judaism. And those answers may or may not work for folks who are only just hearing about us. But this is the work that I want to be doing and that I am doing with many of you, and I invite all of you to help us think about this, because to me, this is how we get to SHJ at 100. We think about humanistic Judaism as a mission and a cause that we support. And whether or not in 50 more years we will be organizing ourselves in the same way becomes less relevant than the meaning and value behind it. I'm confident that there will be, if there are humans in 50 years, that there will be humanistic Judaism in 50 years. I'm less confident that our institutions will be here or be the same. And if we are working on that bigger vision, it becomes less relevant about how we're organizing ourselves if we can provide that bigger piece for more people. And there are many ways that we can explain humanistic Judaism as a cause and as a mission. One of them is secular spirituality. So I'm using a word now that a lot of people in our movement don't want to use, spirituality, because it has the word spirit in it. I always like to explain, I'm not talking about something floating above my body that enters me when I am at the beach or something and see a beautiful sunset. I'm talking about chemical reactions in my brain. But they are good chemical reactions in my brain that I seek out. And when I see beautiful art at a museum, or I hear beautiful music, or I am at the beach and watching the sunset, I feel something. And I want to feel that whenever I can. And again, if you're doing humanistic Shabbat services, we were here, most of us were here last night. Were there moments during that service where you felt something? Did it move you? Did it move you enough that you would want to do it again within the next month, week, year? We should be consciously striving for that kind of impact with everything that we do if the goal is spirituality. And I want to reclaim that word, which is why I use it. But if you use other words like awe, that's fine too. And I want to provide that for more people. And I want to be able to sell it. Because when your friends go to the local yoga studio or meditation studio, which is everywhere, right? It's doing something for them, and they could probably articulate fairly easily what it does for them. And Judaism, not just humanistic Judaism, Judaism, a part of it, is supposed to work that way too. And it can. And the question we have to ask ourselves is it? That's one. The other one I will give, because I mentioned I'm intermarried. I think our mission is to open this up for everybody who might benefit from this. And one of the things I'm most proud of in terms of being a part of the humanistic Judaism movement is that there are no barriers. We're the only denomination that maintains no barriers to participation. And a part of it, admittedly, is because we're not bound by Jewish law. And we don't have to struggle with who gets to stand on the bima. It's still a conversation in some conservative synagogues. And in the Reform movement, who gets to say a blessing over the Torah readings. None of that. If it's going to be meaningful for people, we're not checking credentials at the door, and I think that's incredibly powerful. But they're not walking through the door if it's not going to be meaningful, if it's not going to do something for them. So I have a built-in measure that lives with me because it's my wife, and I have to convince her why do any of this. And I can see if it's working for her or not, and I can see what's working for her. A huge part of why I'm involved is because knowing Jewish history gives me a connection to where I fit in the human story. It's not going to work for my wife. She has a connection through her Japanese heritage, and frankly, I love having a connection to that history as well. I know more Japanese history than she does, actually, but she gets all the names right. I can't pronounce the names. But for her, it's in some ways ritual for the major holidays, but more importantly, it's who we're doing the ritual with. It's with the family, with our kids, and it's the food. And she likes gefilte fish, and she says, I eat gefilte fish and chopped liver. I'm as Jewish as you. So I think we can provide meaning not just to folks who came up through our movement or grew up in the other denominations, but people who are looking for it in their lives and who already connect with us philosophically and may want to add this component. Fourth question, how is our movement different than all other Jewish denominational movements? With all other Jewish denominations, everyone's heard of them, yet their theology stinks. Sorry. No, okay, that was harsh. Their theology doesn't resonate with us. Our movement's philosophy aligns with how many, if not most, Jews see the world. So why does it feel like hardly anybody's heard of us? And how many times has this happened to you, where you give your elevator pitch for Humanistic Judaism to a friend or family member, and the first reaction is, oh yeah, that kind of sounds like how I am. And the very next thing is, how come I've never heard of you before? It doesn't always happen. I was at my birthday party for one of my son's classmates, and I gave my pitch to a woman, and this was in Brooklyn, and she said, oh yeah, Peter Schweitzer married me and my husband. So I'm like, okay, I don't have to explain it. But that was, mind-blowing, because I was expecting those usual 1-2 punch. So we have exciting news. I feel excited about it. I think our board is excited about it. And that Rachel did this to great effect last night, that I'm announcing here for the first time. I don't even really remember what it was she announced, but it was exciting when she said that. Can you remember what that was? A survey, yes. So we're doing something similar. So Miriam immediately turned around and looked at me when she said that, because it made us feel, we use mental telepathy, that we're on the right track with this. But we have a generous grant to engage with a really excellent high-level marketing firm to get at what we're talking about today, which is, what is the language and what are the values that we can put out there to the larger American community that is going to help us get over this hurdle of people not being aware of who we are. And so that's one of the exciting pieces of news. So that is now, I think we'll take half a day on Monday after this conference. But then we'll get right to work on this exciting initiative. And we also have a generous grant to implement what we find out from this marketing firm, whether they learn it through I'd love to use focus groups of people who are out there who might be our target audience, whatever visuals or taglines or others. And this is not about SHJ. This is about Humanistic Judaism. So this second piece is to implement what we learn from this marketing firm. And for that, we have a grant, but it's a seed grant. So we will build around it a capacity campaign. So you may have heard of a capital campaign. If you're here at the Birmingham Temple, you definitely know what a capital campaign is. A capacity campaign is not to build a building. It is to build the capacity to implement a vision and a mission. So this is a seed grant that we will work diligently to fundraise around, and we'll invite all of you to be a part of that mission as well, to make the world aware of Humanistic Judaism and what it can do for them, how it could benefit them, and grow, not for growth's sake, but because we have something amazing that we want to share with more people. So thank you so much for listening to my 4 questions today and for participating in this. And I'm going to open it up to some Q&A. We do have a good chunk of time. Here's my rules. So Jeff knew everybody last night and only gave the mic to people he knew were not going to speechify. My rule is, if the second sentence of yours is not ending in a question mark, I will ask you what your question is. So thoughts, reactions, statements leading into questions. Anybody want to jump in?
I'm very excited to have connected with Humanistic Judaism.
You want to say who you are and where you're from?
Dominic, I've got a 1-year-old group going on in Madison, Wisconsin. The only group, I think, in the state of Wisconsin. I'm having trouble coming up with the elevator speech. I try and convey my excitement, and I don't know what to focus on. I don't know what to say about what happened to God in our movement. Sometimes I emphasize the fact that you don't have to be an atheist. It's just that we focus on the human element, and we stay in touch with our traditions, but we don't need the theology to find meaning. That's not even very concise, right? It better be a long elevator ride. I just don't know what to focus on, and maybe what to leave out of that initial conversation as well.
It's a huge controversy, and I'm happy to hear what other people's elevator speeches are, and I'll tell you mine, and many of you will be very unhappy with it, because what I say to people is that ours is a denomination of American Judaism that is for Jews who don't believe in God or don't believe in the God of the Bible, but still find great meaning and resonance in Jewish life cycle events and holiday celebrations and history and culture and connection to peoplehood. Now, the objection that I've heard is, why are you leading with what we don't believe? But that's the news. That is the story. That is the exciting, that's the headline, right? And it was for Sherwin Wine 50 years ago. Like, Time magazine didn't say Rabbi enacting his values. So I get it. And I've been helped to understand that if you're going to say a negative, it has to immediately at least be followed up by a positive, and some people want to do the positive first and then say, but without supernatural intervention. I think supernatural is a great word, because most people, when you say supernatural, just think, oh, that's crazy. But then when you say religion or God, they're like, well, you can't touch that. So supernatural is a good word, but it's a challenge, and this is part of the challenge that I think we have to work on. But I'll also say that when we do this marketing research, and then when we create the capacity to do a major marketing push, if we don't have the people on the ground and the communities to serve the folks that are coming to us, we will see them once and then never again. So that's not the only work that we have to do around marketing and promotion. It is a lot of hard work on the inside about meaning creation, programming, and really asking ourselves the hard questions of, does this work for us? So that when we do drive people to our communities, that they are blown away. I hear consistently about the bar and bat mitzvahs in our communities that completely blow people away, including the Orthodox grandparents, the Catholic grandparents are just amazed at the experience. And we have to capture that for everything that we do, so that people come out of the experience.
Can I answer
Yes.
the question too?
What's your elevator speech?
I usually start from a different angle. I like the position of trying to interview. It doesn't always work. But I usually reciprocate with a question, why do you ask? And then I try to answer in a way that would really answer the reason that this person is asking me the question. If I don't get that, and sometimes I don't, rarely, but sometimes I don't, I start with sovereignty. I start with a place of this is a authentic kind of Judaism which focuses on my autonomous decisions. And I enjoy life, I want to live a good life, so I need meaning, integrity, and dignity. Usually this pulls him or her into the conversation and then starts the conversation. But I believe that starting from the place that to say you matter, you are autonomous, therefore we should continue this conversation, usually proves as a good way to continue and to talk about other things as well.
Great, thank you. I can't believe there's a Jewish person who answers a question with another question. I realize as you're speaking that I have this added advantage because the question that I'm answering is, what do you do for a living, right? So I don't then say, well, why are you asking, right? It would seem kind of rude.
As I ask
Do you want to say your name and where?
Oh, my name's Kent Barabee from Tucson. As I think what has had an impression on me at services, one is beautiful music. And so I wonder why we don't use some recorded beautiful Jewish music. The other thing that had an impression on me when I was a confirmation student was when I visited a Russian Orthodox service. They had a censer, a smell that
Incense.
incense. And I think also at Havdalah services,
Right, the spices.
we have the spices. So I'm thinking of what sensory experiences would enrich
Yes.
the experience, and those two things come to mind.
Music, super important. We've got a beautiful piano player here at the Birmingham Temple, but I think in many of our communities we need to think about how do we get great music, and if it can't be live music, recorded music might be an option, but we might be able to get some live music too for people who love doing it and are talented. It's got to be talent. Yeah.
My name is Gary Held. I'm from Miami, Florida, where there is no congregation or community in Humanistic Judaism. The nearest one is in Boca Raton. I was excited to hear that you were doing this study and researching how to reach Humanistic Jews in a community where maybe one doesn't exist, but it sounded like your purpose was to create a community that people can go to, and I'm sort of thinking maybe the modern version is more social media based with a quarterly or annual gathering in the community, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on that.
Absolutely, and that's a piece of what I'm referring to when I say we need to think about alternative paths for people. Rabbi Denise Handlarski is here. Is she in? Yeah. And she has done something very innovative from our movement, which is to create secularsynagogue.com, and that is a community online. And we have a very lively Facebook discussion group. For those of you who are on Facebook, if you're not yet in our discussion group, we're now up to, I know Arthur knows the exact number, but I think it's 630 something. And it's mostly 10 of us posting, but everyone's looking at it, people are responding, and what's remarkable is when somebody has a question of Jewish meaning, you've got almost the whole range of our rabbis answering. So you've got amazing expertise to reply to folks who have questions. And a couple of folks have really left beautiful comments about this is my community, like a Facebook group. It's not a community. I hate to burst anyone's bubble. You need people in your lives physically, and this is part of the challenge. But what you're talking about in terms of this is our community for much of the time, but then we come together in person. Maybe not a flash mob necessarily, but maybe we create chapters, and it is, if you've got 5 local members of SHJ, they get together to do this or that, and we support them in some ways, but not in the ways a full community gets support. Those are the kind of questions that our board has already been thinking about, and that I invite our entire movement to weigh in on, because the more options we give people, the better. And I know that some folks might feel like, well, then you cannibalize what already exists. And I know that that's not the case, because you reach more people. And we have to do things, and we have to recognize that some of this stuff is going to totally flop. But in order to get innovative and discover what does work, we have to try a lot of different things. Yeah, Walt.
Walt Hellman from Kol Shalom in Portland, Oregon. Paul talked about bringing something to people through the elevator, bringing something to people that's going to help them improve their lives. I found that one of the most successful things that works with people is to say that this is a way to maintain or establish your Jewish roots. Roots are very, very important to people, especially if they have children. Way to maintain or establish your Jewish roots without the supernatural overlay.
Great, thank you. Rick.
Rick Golin, I'm organizing a group in Gainesville, Florida. We talk about a passion for humanistic Judaism and the rise of the nuns, but I think that a lot of Jews have become so alienated from Jewish community that they've they sought to be a member of the humanistic community. And perhaps part of our discussion should be on trying to expand the passion for humanism and rediscovery of Judaism as one form of humanism.
Well, one of the questions I want to put to this marketing firm, because it's this theory I have, which is if you just get many more Jews to understand what humanism is, then they're by default going to recognize, oh, I guess I'm a humanist and I'm Jewish, and then they put the 1 and 2 together themselves. It's the humanism piece that they're unaware of. And as I said, when I tell people about this, they all basically say, yeah, that describes what I am. I mean, humanism for so many people, it's just common sense. It just makes sense for people. So it's a theory, and I want to try it out, and I want to get experts in on it, and I want them to ask those actual people. But when I think about the overlap, first of all, and Sarah Levin is here from Secular Coalition for America, Society for Humanistic Judaism, on behalf of all of our members, was a founding member of Secular Coalition for America. And Secular Coalition for America brings together, I think it's 18 or 19 now? 19 amazing organizations, including CSJO, to recognize and serve the growing number of secular Americans. And I see so many potential opportunities to work with these other groups. There's a great and rising, growing student group called Secular Student Alliance on campuses. And to me, they're in some ways a much more natural partner for us than Hillel. And I can see us establishing on campus a program or group of students that sits in between Secular Student Alliance and Hillel. And they do the Seder, and they invite the kids from Secular Student Alliance to their humanistic Seder, and the kids from Hillel. So I think there are great opportunities with the organizations that are doing great work and are growing in the secular world, and we have our foot in that world. Richard?
My question is, are there any women who have questions? And Judy and Sue Shalom both have questions.
Thank you. Thank you for pointing out my inherent sexism. I appreciate that. It's so true.
So Gary, I'm going to have my wife ask my question.
Oh my God.
No workarounds, Richard. I actually have a question for Sivan, who I would like to hear more from. I've been thinking about and wondering about the secular humanistic Jewish movement in Israel, and if it is experiencing the same kind of difficulty in growth, or is it the same? And wondering to what extent is it possible that there's a connection to be made between secular humanistic Jews in both countries as a way to bridge more interest in Israel by our young people who seem to be less connected to Israel. And is that a potential connection point for them?
Do you want to say your name and community?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Judy Gladstone. I'm from the Secular Jewish Circle in Seattle, Washington.
And I think I can answer that for Sivan. No, I'm just kidding.
I just want to take the opportunity also to mention a book that Professor Yaakov Malkin, both the provost of our International Institute and a good friend of Sherwin and my father, wrote many years ago about Judaism, faith, secularity, and spirituality. So I recommend that. I certainly think that we certainly do. Maybe I don't know English well enough, but we certainly should have in all our celebrations this moment of awe and excitement, and yes, for me, that's spirituality. So that's to that. But I want to try and answer Judy. I want to connect that also to the former question about humanism. I think that we should be careful in claiming that humanism is only ours. I mean, we all know it isn't. And it is a bridge for us to talk to many other people and to many other groups. And it is a way for us to spearhead amongst this group a unique way of dealing with humanism or expressing humanism. One of the things that we've done in Israel, and we do that in every ordination, we have 2 days of a colloquium, and the first day, and those of you who will be traveling with Adam to Israel will experience that. The first day is all about pluralism. It's all about getting together with many other groups and always try to find something that we can offer. So 2 years ago, in the previous ordination, we created a colloquium which is called Unity but Not Uniformity. This is a coin that my father coined this phrase. And the idea was to get all the deans of all the rabbinical schools in Israel, Reform and Conservative, non-denominational, and 3 Orthodox seminaries, to sit down together and to ask ourselves, what is the role of the new Jewish leader that we're all teaching? All these rabbis, what are we doing together? Being in that situation, creating a new kind of forum that didn't ever exist, and my dream is that in a few years from now we will have an international forum like that, of all the denominations sitting down together and saying, okay, what's our future? What do we want? What do we want our leaders to look like? What do we have to do in order for them to achieve? Puts us, secular humanists, at the realm of innovative thinking and making us relevant to them. So, partly the answer to your question is, as a movement, we are growing in both in numbers but in awareness that we matter. The other thing is that we have ordained until today 37 rabbis, and in November we will be ordaining 4 more. We have 20 rabbinical students studying with us. We have been fortunate to be supported by the SHJ here and the Pivnik Foundation in growing communities in Israel. I never believed that anybody would want to go to a secular congregation in Israel. The word doesn't even exist in Hebrew, but it has. Sherwin was right. You teach them, you make them rabbis, and they will create communities, and that's exactly what happened. And so we now have 5 communities in Israel, and believe it or not, 3 of them are supported by the government. We were able to do that because of the support of the Pivnik Foundation. And the good news is that 2 weeks ago, just before Pesach, there was a change in some bureaucracy, and we will be able to support 2 more communities in cities in Israel. So the answer is yes, we're growing. We have similar problems to, or challenges to what I'm hearing you have here, and that is that we have a lot of people who would probably consider themselves nuns, but we could still serve them. And one of our biggest challenges, like yours, is how do we serve them? So one way is to say, we have a common denominator, even if you don't know if you are uniquely secular humanist and you want to be part of the organization, but you feel humanist and you want to celebrate your Judaism, fine, we have ways to do that. The weddings, the number of weddings and bar mitzvahs, etc., do not confine to our communities. Like here, we do it to whoever we get a chance to talk to. I believe collaboration and being a leader is part of the answer of how to get to more people.
Great, thank you. And of course, if there ever is separation of religion and government in Israel, we'll gladly give that money back that we got from. No, just kidding. It's really, yeah, it's really remarkable what's happening in Israel. We are moving to the rest of our day, so I want to thank you all so much for participating.